Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade of the scalpel hovered 3 millimeters above the jugular, trembling not from fear, but from the terrifying urge to push down. "Give me one reason," Kalen hissed, his voice a jagged shard of glass against the sterile silence of the operating theater. "One reason why I shouldn't finish what your enemy started." Beneath him, the man strapped to the steel table didn't beg. He didn't bargain. He simply opened eyes the color of molten gold, predatory, lucid, and terrifyingly amused, and smirked through a mouthful of blood. "Because, little doctor," the alpha rasped, his pheromones flooding the room like a tidal wave of crushed cedar and ozone, suffocating Kalen's resolve. "If I die, there will be no one left in this godforsaken city powerful enough to protect you from what comes next." 3 hours earlier, the rain in Sector 4 hadn't just been falling, it had been an assault. It hammered against the corrugated tin roofs of the Undercity, a ceaseless, rhythmic drumming that usually drowned out the screams of the destitute. Kalen preferred the rain. It washed away the grime, the soot, and, if he was lucky, the lingering sense of the alphas who prowled the upper levels, descending only when they needed to break something or someone. Kalen was a ghost in the machine of the city, an unregistered omega living off the grid, surviving on black market suppressants and his wits. He was a surgeon by trade, a butcher by necessity. He patched up gang members, prostitutes, and the occasional unlucky revolutionary who had bitten off more than they could chew. He hated them all, but he hated alphas the most. They were biology's cruelest joke, arrogance wrapped in muscle and instinct, ruling the world simply because they could growl louder. He should have walked past the alleyway behind the Neon Lotus Club. He should have ignored the trail of blood, thick and dark, mixing with the oily puddles on the cobblestones. His instincts, sharpened by years of evasion, screamed at him, *run. Hide. Survive, *. But Kalen had a fatal flaw. He was a healer. When he found the body slumped amidst the trash bags, half submerged in filth, he didn't see a tyrant. He saw a collapsed lung and a severed femoral artery. "Idiot," Kalen muttered to himself, kneeling in the muck. His hands, gloved in cheap latex, moved automatically. He applied pressure, checking the vitals. The man was massive. Even in his unconscious state, he radiated an aura of oppressive power. His suit was bespoke, the fabric worth more than Kalen's entire clinic, though it was now shredded and soaked in crimson. A highborn. A prime alpha. The worst kind. Kalen saw the family crest on the man's cufflinks, a silver viper coiled around a dagger. The Vane family. The rulers of the Spire. The architects of the very system that kept Kalen living in the mud. "Leave him," a voice whispered in Kalen's head. *, let the rats have him. "It's justice, *. The alpha groaned, a low, tectonic rumble. His hand shot out, gripping Kalen's wrist with a strength that should have been impossible for a dying man. "Help!" The word was barely a breath, but it carried the weight of a command. Kalen looked at the hand crushing his wrist. He looked at the face, pale as marble, sharp-jawed and devastatingly handsome even in death's doorway. He cursed his own soft heart. "If you bite me," Kalen snarled, dragging the heavy body onto his maglev gurney, "I'll kill you myself." The clinic was a converted basement, smelling of antiseptic and damp concrete. The lights hummed with an erratic buzz. Kalen worked with the precision of a maestro. He had to. The damage was extensive. 3 gunshot wounds, lacerations from a monofilament blade, and signs of a neurotoxin in the blood. He had intubated the alpha, stabilized his heart rate, and was currently stitching the deep gash across the man's abdomen. It was intimate work. Too intimate. Kalen's suppressants were running low. The stress of the surgery, the heat of the room, and the overwhelming proximity to a prime alpha were chipping away at his chemical barriers. He could smell the man, not just the cedar and ozone, but something deeper. Gunpowder. Old leather. And beneath the aggression, a strange, compelling warmth that pulled at Kalen's instincts like a magnet. "Stop it," Kalen scolded himself, his hands steady despite the racing of his heart. He is a patient. He is the enemy. He finished the suture and stepped back, stripping off his bloody gloves. He washed his hands at the sink, the cold water doing little to cool the flush on his neck. When he turned around, the Alpha was awake. It shouldn't have been possible. The anesthesia Kalen had administered would have kept a normal man under for hours. But the Vane bloodline was bred for resilience. The Alpha, whose name the news feeds screamed daily, Darius Vane, was sitting up on the edge of the table. He looked like a fallen angel, shirtless, bandaged, his black hair falling over eyes that tracked Kalen's every movement. "Where am I?" Darius asked. His voice was rough, but the authority was intact. "The bowels of the city," Kalen replied, leaning against the counter, crossing his arms to hide the tremor in his hands. He picked up a scalpel, a futile gesture of defense. "Sector 4. You were dying in my dumpster." Darius looked around the dingy room, his lip curling slightly. "And you are the idiot who sewed you back together." Darius's gaze snapped back to Kalen. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. Kalen froze. He knew what was happening. The Alpha was scenting him. "You smell." Darius narrowed his eyes, tilting his head. "Sweet. Like night-blooming jasmine and bitter rain. You're masking it, but it's there." Kalen's grip tightened on the scalpel. "I'm a beta. Liar," Darius purred. He slid off the table. He stumbled slightly, the blood loss still affecting him, but he righted himself with terrifying grace. He took a step toward Kalen. "You're an Omega? Unregistered. Hiding in the filth." "Stay back," Kalen warned, raising the blade. Darius ignored the threat. He closed the distance, towering over Kalen. The sheer size of the man was overwhelming. Kalen was backed against the sink, trapped. "Why save me, little Omega?" Darius murmured, leaning down until his face was inches from Kalen's. "You know who I am. You know my family enforces the Registration Act. You could have let me die and been a hero to these rats." "I took an oath," Kalen said, his voice straining to remain steady. "To do no harm." "How noble," Darius mocked gently. "And how foolish." That was the moment Kalen held the scalpel to the jugular. That was the moment the air in the room thickened to a suffocating density. "Give me one reason," Kalen had asked. And Darius had answered with the truth. "If I die, there will be no one left." "To protect you." Kalen hesitated. In that split second of hesitation, Darius moved. His hand, lightning fast, clamped around Kalen's wrist. A twist, a sharp flare of pain, and the scalpel clattered to the floor. Before Kalen could scream, he was spun around, his back pressed against Darius's chest. A heavy arm locked across his throat. "You should have run," Darius whispered into his ear, his breath hot against Kalen's sensitive nape. "But you didn't. You saved the monster. And now, the monster isn't going to let you go." The extraction was professional and violent. Within 10 minutes of Darius waking, the clinic's door was kicked in. But it wasn't the police. It was Darius's personal guard, clad in matte black armor. They didn't ask questions. They secured the perimeter, secured Darius, and then, at a nod from the Alpha, they secured Kalen. He wasn't arrested. He was collected. They threw a hood over his head and shoved him into the back of an aero transport. Kalen fought, kicking and cursing, but a sedative injected into his neck turned his limbs to lead. The last thing he heard was Darius's voice, calm and commanding, ordering his men to burn the clinic down. "My life," Kalen thought as the darkness took him. He burned my life. He woke up in a bed that was softer than clouds. The sheets were silk, cool against his skin. The air smelled filtered, purified, devoid of the smog and rot of the Undercity. Kalen shot up, gasping. He was in a room the size of his entire clinic. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the city below, a sprawling ocean of neon lights and misery, looking deceptively beautiful from this height. He was in the spire, the penthouse level. He scrambled out of bed, realizing he was wearing nothing but a loose silk shirt that wasn't his. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He ran to the door. Locked. He ran to the windows. Reinforced glass, unbreakable. "You're awake." Kalen whirled around. Darius was sitting in a high-backed leather chair in the corner of the room, holding a glass of amber liquid. He wore a fresh suit, charcoal gray, tailored to perfection. The bandages were hidden, but Kalen knew exactly where the stitches lay beneath the fabric. "You burned my home," Kalen accused, his voice trembling with rage. "I removed a liability, Darius corrected calmly. Your enemies, and mine, would have traced you there. They would have tortured you to find out what you knew about my condition. I did you a favor. A favor? Kalen laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You kidnapped me. You destroyed everything I worked for. You worked in a sewer, stitching up junkies, Darius said, setting his glass down. He stood up and walked toward Kalen. You are a surgeon with skills that rival the best in the Corps. You are an Omega with a spirit that refuses to break. You were wasted there. I was free there, Kalen spat. Were you? Darius stopped a few feet away. Hiding your scent? Living in fear of discovery? Scrounging for suppressants? He shook his head. That isn't freedom, Kalen. That is survival. I am offering you life. I don't want anything from you. Kalen stepped back, hitting the glass of the window. I want to leave. No. The word was absolute. You can't keep me here. I can, Darius said softly. And I will. He closed the distance again. This time, the dynamic was different. Darius wasn't attacking, he was encroaching. He placed a hand on the glass beside Kalen's head, boxing him in. You saved me, Darius said, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling through Kalen's chest. In my world, a debt of life is absolute. You belong to me now. I am not a thing to be owned, Kalen hissed, though his legs felt weak. The pheromones were stronger here. Darius was projecting intent, possession, dominance, and something dangerously like desire. You are my doctor, Darius corrected. My confidant. And he leaned in, inhaling the scent at the junction of Kalen's neck and shoulder. Kalen shivered involuntarily. My fated. The world stopped. Kalen's breath hitched. No, that's a myth. A fairy tale for fools. Is it? Darius pulled back, his gold eyes boring into Kalen's soul. Then why did you hesitate with the scalpel? Why does your pulse hammer against your skin when I am close? Why is my scent the only thing that calms the panic in your blood? It's biology, Kalen argued weakly. It's a chemical defect. It's destiny, Darius countered. I felt it the moment I woke up. The bond. It's why I didn't kill you for seeing me weak. It's why I brought you here. He reached out, his fingers grazing Kalen's cheek. Kalen flinched, but didn't pull away. I have spent my life surrounded by sycophants and enemies. I have never known anyone who would hold a knife to my throat and demand a reason to let me live. You are magnificent. Kalen slapped his hand away. I hate you. Darius smiled, a slow, wolfish grin. Good. Hate is passion. I can work with hate. Indifference is what I cannot abide. The weeks that followed were a war of attrition. Kalen was a prisoner in a gilded cage. He had access to a library, a state-of-the-art medical lab, and food he had only dreamed of. But he was denied the one thing he craved, the door. Darius was a confusing captor. He was arrogant, demanding, and often ruthless in his business dealings, which he conducted from the penthouse. Kalen watched him destroy rival corporations with a phone call. He watched him order strikes on rebel cells in the lower sectors. But in the evenings, the dynamic shifted. Darius would come to the medical lab for Kalen to check his wounds. He would sit quietly, watching Kalen work. They would talk, debates on philosophy, on the ethics of the Registration Act, on the nature of power. Kalen realized, with horror, that Darius was brilliant. He wasn't a mindless brute. He believed that order was the only thing keeping humanity from extinction, even if that order was cruel. You think me a tyrant, Darius said one evening, as Kalen changed the dressing on his side. You are a tyrant, Kalen muttered, taping the gauze. Perhaps, Darius conceded. But the alternative is chaos. If the Vane family falls, the other houses will tear this city apart. Millions will die, including the people in your undercity. So you oppress us to save us? Kalen scoffed. I control the wolves so the sheep can sleep, Darius said. He caught Kalen's hand. His thumb rubbed over Kalen's knuckles. And now I have found a wolf in sheep's clothing. Kalen tried to pull his hand away, but Darius held fast. My heat is coming, Kalen blurted out. It was a desperate admission. He had felt the pre-symptoms for days, the fever, the ache, the heightened sensitivity. Without his black market suppressants, he was vulnerable. Darius went still. His pupils dilated, swallowing the gold. I know. I need suppressants, Kalen said, his voice cracking. Give me some. Please. No, Darius said. You bastard, Kalen whispered. You plan to force me? Darius's expression darkened. He stood up, towering over Kalen. Is that what you think of me? That I would take you like a common beast? He looked genuinely offended. I told you, Kalen. I want you. But I want you to choose me. I will never choose you. We shall see, Darius said. He walked to a secure cabinet in the wall, keyed in a code, and pulled out a vial. He tossed it to Kalen. Kalen caught it. It was a high-grade suppressant. The legal kind. The expensive kind. Take it, Darius said, turning his back. Suppress the heat. Deny your nature. Deny us. But know this. Every time you swallow those pills, you are running from the only truth that matters. Kalen stood there, clutching the vial, his heart warring with his mind. He took the pills. But that night, as he lay in the silk sheets, the scent of Darius on the pillow next to him, where the alpha had sat earlier, kept him awake, aching for something the medicine couldn't cure. The breaking point came a week later. The attack wasn't subtle. A rival house, the Mortalis, had allied with a radical faction of the rebellion. They bypassed the Spire's security grid using a stolen code. The explosion rocked the penthouse, shattering the unbreakable glass. Kalen was thrown across the room, ears ringing. Smoke filled the air. Kalen! Darius's voice roared through the chaos. Kalen scrambled up, coughing. Gunfire erupted in the hallway. The door burst open. Darius was there, a kinetic rifle in one hand, a combat knife in the other. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Get behind me, Darius commanded. Mercenaries poured into the room. They were heavily armed, wearing gas masks. Darius moved like a blur of violence. He shot two before they crossed the threshold, then engaged the third in hand-to-hand combat. Kalen looked at the shattered window. The wind whipped into the room. The fire escape was just outside. He could run. In the confusion, he could disappear. He could go back to the Undercity. He took a step toward the window. Vane is down, a mercenary shouted. Kalen looked back. Darius had taken a plasma round to the shoulder. He was on one knee, fighting off two attackers, but he was overwhelmed. They were closing in for the kill. If Darius died, Kalen was free. If Darius dies, the city burns, the thought flashed through his mind. Asterisk if Darius dies. I will be alone, asterisk. It wasn't politics that moved him. It wasn't logic. It was the sudden, visceral terror of a world without the golden-eyed monster who had looked at him and seen a partner instead of a servant. Kalen grabbed a canister of liquid nitrogen from the overturned medical cart. He didn't run to the window. He ran into the fray. Duck! Kalen screamed. Darius, trusting the voice instinctively, dropped flat. Kalen hurled the canister and shot it with a discarded pistol he scooped from the floor. The canister exploded, a flash freeze wave that encased the two mercenaries in a prison of instant ice. Darius surged up from the floor, his knife finding the throat of the last attacker. Silence fell, broken only by the howling wind and their ragged breathing. Darius turned to Kalen. He was battered, bleeding, his suit ruined again. He looked at Kalen, standing there with the smoking gun, chest heaving. You stayed, Darius said, wonder coloring his tone. You could have run. You're a terrible patient, Kalen gasped, dropping the gun. You keep getting injured. Darius laughed, a sound of pure relief. He walked over to Kalen, ignoring his own wounds. He reached out, his hands cupping Kalen's face. His thumbs wiped away the soot on Kalen's cheeks. Why? Darius asked again. Because, Kalen whispered, finally admitting the truth to himself. He leaned into the touch, his resistance crumbling like the ice around them. Because I hate you. But I think I couldn't survive you dying. Darius closed his eyes, resting his forehead against Kalen's. I told you. You belong to me. And you, Kalen retorted, grabbing Darius's lapels and pulling him down, belong to me. If you ever pull a stunt like this again, I'll sedate you for a month. Deal? Darius breathed. He kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It tasted of blood, smoke, and adrenaline. It was a collision of two worlds, a breaking of laws, a claiming that went both ways. Kalen opened his mouth, allowing the alpha in, allowing the bond to snap into place with a force that nearly buckled his knees. The sound of sirens rose from the city below. Reinforcements were coming. The war for the city was just beginning. Darius broke the kiss, breathless, his eyes burning with a fierce, possessive light. He pulled Kalen against his side, facing the shattered window and the city that awaited them. "Let them come," Darius said, his voice a low growl. "Let them all come. They have no idea what they are facing now." Kalen looked at the Alpha, then at the city that had tried to crush them both. He felt the fear, yes. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone. He felt powerful. "No," Kalen agreed, his hand finding Darius's and interlacing their fingers. "They don't." And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. Or perhaps, how the wolf finally learned to hunt with the viper. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen take control of his destiny and his alpha, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a man who kidnapped you if he turned out to be your soulmate? Or would you have left him to the assassins? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,